last week on Legally Kidnapped.
Good evening. Our top story this week. After formally announcing her candidacy for president, Representative Michelle Bachmann claims that a devastating miscarriage ultimately helped shape her views on abortion and misled her to become a foster parent. The media is attacking Ms. Bachmann over her exaggerated foster parenting claims, and George Stephanopoulos promises Bachmann that her foster kids will be tracked down and investigated. Florida's Department of Children and Families prepares for a massive influx of new foster kids as the state implements its new drug testing for welfare recipients program, and kids are getting injured while being restrained in state-licensed residential facilities. A study from the University of New Hampshire reveals that children in foster care tend to have more behavioral and emotional problems than their peers. And in Indiana, a high court overrides a lower court decision banning the state from placing high-needs foster kids in out-of-state treatment facilities. The Missouri legislature passes a bill allowing citizens to donate part of their tax refund to the foster care system. Governor of Alaska signs a new bill toughening the penalties for child abuse cases. New York cuts a program that helps grandparents who are raising kids after being taken by the child protective industry. The Supreme Court agrees to take a look at the government's efforts to regulate profanity and sexual content on broadcast television. A new study reveals that most parents in the United States spank their kids, and thanks to the recession, the number of homeless children in the USA is increasing while the states cut funding for social service programs. In India this week, parents are paying surgeons to perform sex change operations on children, and even the social workers are whining about Ireland's child protective industry. South Korea wants to change its reputation as the world's leading baby exporter for the adoption industry by increasing domestic adoptions and keeping more kids with their families. And one of those Korean kids who was sold to parents in the United States finds his real parents almost 30 years later. In New Zealand, a leading specialist in child protection estimates that 1 in 10 children live in abusive households. A mother from Quebec faces a court in Saudi Arabia for trying to kidnap her children and take them back to Canada. A mother from Spain who had her 15-month-old baby taken away for refusing to wean is reunited with the child. And a group of prostitutes in Colombia unite against child abuse. In Australia this week, the child protective industry is failing teenagers in Victoria. One who aged out of foster care right onto the streets is now speaking out against the system. An expert warns on the cost of placing kids in privately run agencies opposed to state-run foster homes. And the Aussie government passes a bill expanding the definition of child abuse to include unharmed children who witness domestic violence. In Canada this week, critics are demanding answers after a report reveals that 6 children died and 20 were hospitalized while in Alberta's foster care system last year. An ex-foster child from Nova Scotia is suing the child protective industry for details of her past. And in British Columbia, the child protective industry ignores a special needs girl who was left with her mother's corpse for a week. In England, the child protective industry fears that expert witnesses will no longer be willing to testify in child abuse cases after losing their anonymity and immunity. A British mother is busted in a welfare fraud scheme after taking over £60,000 to care for 9 fictional foster children. 2 of the social workers who were fired in the aftermath of the Baby P failure are granted the right to appeal their sacking. A new report by the Children's Workforce Development Council finds that the average social worker has caseloads that are too high, and a father's rights activist dresses up as Batman and tries to arrest the Justice Secretary at his home on behalf of all the children in England who are not allowed to see their fathers. In entertainment news this week, the official winner of the Dumbass of the Year award goes to Bristol Palin, who goes on the Good Morning America show and explains how her virginity was stolen by Levi Johnson when he got her drunk and took advantage of her on a camping trip, but he didn't rape her or anything. Oksana tries to get Mel's lawyer kicked off in their custody battle. UFC fighter Chuck Liddell gets bitch-slapped in family court after being ordered to pay $6,000 a month in child support. Brooke Mueller gets $55,000 a month taken right out of Charlie Sheen's paycheck. Halle Berry accuses her ex of child neglect. Maria Shriver files for divorce against Arnold Schwarzenegger. And the Octomom is getting fed up with all of those kids. A California court rules that a foster mother was sane when she abused and tortured 2 foster children, ultimately killing 1. A couple from Colorado who abused 3 Russian teenagers who they adopted gets probation. A foster dad from Florida is sentenced to life in prison for the sexual battery of a foster child, and the trial of Casey Anthony becomes Orlando's newest tourist attraction. In Maryland, a foster father who is sitting in jail awaiting a court date for molesting 3 foster kids has even more charges laid against him as 4 more boys come forward. And a Minnesota foster father gets 12 years for molesting boys in his care. A couple from Oklahoma is in court after abusing their adopted children by locking them in a storm cellar, feeding them dog food, and whipping them with a horsewhip. A foster parent from Virginia pleads guilty to trying to film a 15-year-old girl when she was naked. And in Georgia, a Department of Human Resources employee pleads guilty to stealing approximately $17,000 in child support payments that had been made by dads. A mother from Missouri is charged with child neglect for leaving her 7- and 2-year-olds with a 13-year-old while she went to the emergency room to be treated for a sickness. In New Jersey, the manager of a child abuse hotline is fired because an 8-year-old dies in her home 9 days after being reported. And finally, tonight in Washington, the child protective industry gets paranoid over a suspicious container and calls out the bomb squad to detonate what turned out to be a tin of beans. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.